Welcome to Crime Podcast's Twisted Love, Crimes of Passion series, episode 6. Today we're diving deep into a case that shook Bangalore, India back in 2014, and you'll see how love and obsession can twist into something dark and dangerous.
These crimes of passion often force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about human nature.
Exactly. We're going to unravel the story of a young woman named Rekha. Imagine yourself in her shoes. You're 25, an aspiring nurse with dreams for yourself and your family. Everything seems bright, full of hope, but as you'll discover, a shadow falls over Rekha's life.
What's striking about Rekha's case is that it reminds us that these tragedies can happen to anyone. We often see a stark contrast between the victim's vibrant personality and the darkness that eventually consumes them.
It's almost as if their light makes them a target for someone with darker intentions. So let's talk about the relationship that ultimately led to this tragedy. Rekha was involved with Prakash, a 28-year-old businessman.
From what we've gathered, their relationship was a whirlwind of emotions. It started with genuine affection, but things quickly turned sour. There are documented instances of arguments, growing distrust, and even signs of Prakash exhibiting controlling behavior.
Controlling behavior, something that can be so subtle at first. It's like a vine slowly wrapping itself around a tree, almost unnoticeable until it's too late. What were some of the early warning signs that Rekha's friends and family noticed?
Well, some close to Rekha described Prakash as possessive. He would often accuse her of infidelity, demand to know her every move, and even try to isolate her from her support system. These are all classic tactics used by abusers to gain control.
It's frightening how abusers manipulate situations, making their victims question their own reality. They make it seem like this possessiveness is a form of love. So let's talk about that fateful night of June 12, 2014. Rekha left her apartment to meet Prakash, telling her roommate she'd be back in a few hours, but she never returned.
Can you imagine the dread her loved ones must felt as the hours ticked by? Then, 2 days later, the devastating news. Rekha's body was found on the outskirts of Bangalore.
And the way she was found, strangled signs of a violent struggle, it paints such a horrific picture.
The brutality of the crime sent shockwaves through the community. Everyone was left wondering who could have done such a thing.
Right, and that's where the Bangalore police stepped in. They launched a full-scale investigation to untangle this web of relationships and find out what really happened to Rekha. What were some of the key findings that started to point them in the right direction?
The investigation uncovered a number of significant details. First, the police started looking into Prakash's behavior. Rekha's friends and family confirmed their suspicions of his controlling nature. He constantly checked her phone, dictated her clothing choices, and even tried to limit her contact with certain friends.
It's like he was trying to erase any part of Rekha that existed outside of their relationship, to make her a blank slate he could control.
Exactly, and then there was the discovery of another man in Rekha's life. Karthik, a coworker who had expressed romantic interest in her.
Ah, so we have a potential love triangle forming here. Did the police consider Karthik a suspect?
Naturally, they investigated him thoroughly, but it quickly became clear that he wasn't involved in Rekha's disappearance. He had a solid alibi, cooperated fully with the investigation, and even provided Rekha's messages to him showing she was considering ending things with Prakash.
This adds another layer to the story. If Prakash found out about Karthik, it could have fueled his jealousy and rage, pushing him further down a dangerous path.
That's exactly what the investigators thought, and then came the most damning piece of evidence. CCTV footage placing Rekha and Prakash together on the night she disappeared. Witnesses even reported seeing them arguing heatedly in his car.
So the evidence was starting to mount against Prakash. The police had him as their prime suspect. What happened next?
Well, under intense questioning, Prakash finally cracked.
He confessed.
He did. Prakash admitted to confronting Rekha about Karthik. He described flying into a rage and ultimately strangling her in his car. Then, in a panic, he tried to cover his tracks by disposing of her body in a remote area.
That's a chilling confession. To hear him recount those final moments, it sends shivers down your spine.
It really does. It reveals the dark depths of his possessiveness and the lengths he was willing to go to control Rekha's life, even if it meant taking it away from her. It's a stark reminder that what might begin as what some may perceive as harmless jealousy can quickly spiral into something far more sinister. It's a pattern we often see in crimes of passion, that escalation from control to violence when the abuser senses they're losing their grip.
That's a crucial point for our listeners to understand. It's like a switch flips in their mind, and suddenly violence becomes their only solution. So with Prakash's confession, what happened next? Did justice prevail for Rekha?
The legal proceedings moved swiftly after the confession. Prakash was officially arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, Rekha's loved ones bravely shared their heart-wrenching testimonies, detailing the emotional abuse she endured and the deeply controlling nature of her relationship with Prakash.
Those testimonies must have been incredibly powerful. To hear firsthand accounts of Rekha's struggles, her hopes, and her dreams that were so cruelly snatched away, it humanizes the victim in a way that nothing else can. It reminds us that this wasn't just a case file, it was a real person whose life was tragically cut short.
Absolutely. And in this instance, those testimonies played a crucial role in securing a conviction. In 2016, Prakash was found guilty of Rekha's murder and sentenced to life imprisonment.
It's a bittersweet victory for Rekha's family, I'm sure. Justice was served, but it can never put her back. This case, like so many others, highlights the devastating consequences of toxic relationships. It's a reminder that we need to be vigilant, not just for ourselves, but for those around us. Let's shift gears a bit and talk about the broader implications of this case. What can we learn from Rekha's story?
Rekha's case sheds light on a much larger issue, the prevalence of toxic relationships, and the often subtle ways they can turn deadly. It underscores the importance of recognizing the warning signs. We've touched on some of them, but let's delve deeper into what a toxic relationship really looks like.
I think a lot of people have a misconception about what constitutes a toxic relationship. They think it's just about constant fighting or physical abuse, but it's often much more insidious than that.
Precisely. It's about a pattern of behavior that aims to control, manipulate, and undermine the other person. It could be something as seemingly insignificant as constantly checking your phone or social media accounts, making snide comments about your appearance, or trying to dictate who you can and cannot be friends with.
You mentioned control earlier. It's almost like the abuser wants to create a world where their partner has no autonomy, no sense of self outside of the relationship. They want to mold them into this ideal version that only exists in their mind.
That's a very insightful observation. And it's important to note that these behaviors don't always start out as overtly abusive. It can be a gradual process with subtle red flags that are easily dismissed or rationalized as signs of love or concern.
That's what makes it so dangerous. It's like that analogy of the frog in boiling water. The temperature rises slowly, and before you know it, you're trapped in a situation that feels inescapable.
So for our listeners out there, what advice would you give to someone who might be in a situation like this? How can they break free from that control and reclaim their life?
The first and most important step is acknowledging that there is a problem. Don't minimize or rationalize the abuse. It's crucial to remember that you are not alone and that there is help available. Reach out to a trusted friend, family member, or a helpline dedicated to domestic violence. They can offer support, guidance, and resources to help you navigate this challenging situation. Speaking of resources, there are organizations dedicated to helping victims of domestic violence. They can provide everything from counseling and legal aid to safe housing options. We'll make sure to include some of those resources in the show notes for this episode so listeners can easily access them.
That's an excellent idea. It's important to emphasize that seeking help is a sign of strength, not weakness. It takes immense courage to break free from an abusive relationship, and there's absolutely no shame in asking for support.
And it's important to remember that leaving an abusive relationship can be dangerous. Abusers often escalate their behavior when they sense they are losing control, so having a safety plan in place is crucial. This could include identifying safe places to stay, packing a bag with essentials, having a code word to alert friends or family if you're in danger, and even practicing escape routes.
Those are all excellent points. It's about taking proactive steps to protect yourself and ensuring your safety during a vulnerable time. We've discussed recognizing the signs and seeking help, but what about prevention? How can we as a society challenge the harmful norms that contribute to these types of toxic dynamics in the first place?
That's a critical question. I think it starts with open and honest conversations about healthy relationships. We need to move away from romanticizing possessive love and jealousy, which are often portrayed as passionate or desirable traits in movies and popular culture. In reality, they're dangerous and can be precursors to abuse.
Absolutely. We need to redefine what love and respect look like. We need to teach young people, in particular, about healthy boundaries, communication, and the importance of consent in all aspects of a relationship.
It's also important to address the underlying societal factors that contribute to these dynamics. We need to challenge gender stereotypes and social norms that perpetuate the idea that one partner should have control or ownership over another.
You're hitting on a vital point. Challenging those deep-seated societal beliefs is essential to creating a culture where healthy relationships are the norm.
And that's a key takeaway for our listeners today. It's not just about recognizing the signs of abuse in your own life. It's about being an active bystander, speaking up when you see something wrong, and advocating for change in your communities.
We can't just sit back and hope things will change on their own. We have a collective responsibility to challenge these harmful norms and create a safer and more equitable world for everyone.
Rekha's story is a powerful reminder of that responsibility. Her tragic case highlights the devastating consequences of unchecked control and possessiveness. It's a story that should compel us to act, to be more aware, more compassionate, and more proactive in creating a world where these tragedies are less likely to occur.
That's a powerful message to end on. Rekha's memory deserves nothing less.
As we discuss this case, I can't help but think about the psychological factors at play. What drives a person to commit such a horrific act in the name of love? It's a question that has puzzled psychologists and criminologists for centuries.
It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but in Prakash's case, we can see a convergence of several psychological elements. His possessiveness, his inability to cope with rejection, and this deeply ingrained belief that he had some kind of ownership over Rekha. All of these things likely fueled his violent outbursts.
It's almost as if his sense of self-worth was so intertwined with Rekha that he couldn't fathom her having a life independent of him. When she tried to assert her independence, his fragile ego couldn't handle it.
That's a very astute observation. His actions were, in a twisted way, a desperate attempt to reclaim control over a situation that was slipping away from him. And sadly, that need for control manifested itself in the most brutal way imaginable.
It's a tragic reminder that unchecked jealousy and possessiveness can have devastating consequences. And it underscores the importance of addressing these issues early on, seeking help if needed, and fostering healthy relationship dynamics based on mutual respect and trust.
Absolutely. We need to challenge the notion that love equals possession. True love is about supporting each other's growth, respecting each other's boundaries, and celebrating each other's individuality.
It's been a heavy but crucial conversation today. Rekha's story is a stark reminder of the dark side of human nature and the twisted paths that love can sometimes take. But it's also a call to action. We can't let tragedies like this go unnoticed. We need to be vigilant, we need to support each other, and we need to challenge the harmful norms that perpetuate these cycles of abuse.
Well said. Knowledge is power, and in cases like this, it can be life-saving. If our discussion today empowers even one listener to recognize the warning signs, seek help, or offer support to someone in need, then Rekha's story will have served a greater purpose.
If you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, please reach out for help. There are resources available, there are people who care, and you don't have to go through this alone. You can find a list of helpful resources on our website and in the show notes for this episode.
Remember, there is hope and there is help. Don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the Rekha murder case. We've explored the complexities of toxic relationships, the psychology of obsession, and the devastating consequences of unchecked violence. We hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking. And as always, remember to subscribe to CrimePod Castle and stay tuned for our next deep dive, where we'll continue to explore the dark side of human nature and the twisted paths that love can sometimes take. Until then, stay safe, stay curious, and as always, stay vigilant.